I never believed in love at first sight. Attraction? Sure. Fascination? Maybe. But love? That took time. Effort. Proof. Then I met Trevor Whitmore. He was the kind of man who seemed to exist in a different world, effortlessly charming, always at the center of attention. His name echoed through the halls of our law school long before I ever spoke to him. Professors admired him, students envied him, and women? Well, they didn't just fall for him. They lined up, waiting for their turn. I wasn't one of them. I watched from a distance, unimpressed. He had a reputation, and I had a future to build. I didn't have time for distractions, especially not the kind that came with a warning label. But Trevor had this way of making himself impossible to ignore. It started small, catching him watching me in class, the way he always seemed to show up wherever I was. And then, one evening, as I sat in the library buried under case files, he slid into the chair across from me with a smirk that was both irritating and, if I'm honest, amusing. "You're the only woman here who hasn't fallen for me yet," he said, resting his chin on his hand. "I figured I should at least introduce myself before you become a Supreme Court justice and forget all about me." I rolled my eyes, but a small smile tugged at my lips before I could stop it. That was the problem with Trevor. He had a way of disarming people, of making them feel like the only one in the room. And somehow, despite every warning my instincts gave me, I let him in. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless, just some lighthearted banter, an amusing distraction from the endless hours of studying. But Trevor was persistent in a way that was difficult to ignore. He wasn't just a smooth talker. He listened. He noticed things. The way I liked my coffee. The fact that I always chewed on my pen when deep in thought. The way I tensed my shoulders when I was stressed. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that he was like this with everyone. But then came the moments that made me wonder. The way his gaze lingered a second too long, the way he always found an excuse to be near me. And then, one night, he caught me off guard. We had spent hours in the library, debating a case study, our usual back and forth laced with amusement. But as I gathered my things to leave, he reached for my wrist, gentle, deliberate. "Madison," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "let me take you out. No games, no pretense, just us." I should have said no. I should have remembered who he was, the man who never settled, the one who always had an escape route. But against all logic, against every instinct I had, I found myself nodding. And that was the beginning of everything. That first date was nothing like I expected. No flashy displays, no grand gestures, just a quiet restaurant tucked away from campus, a bottle of wine between us, and a side of Trevor I had never seen before. He talked about his childhood, the pressure of living up to his family's expectations, the weight of always being Trevor Whitmore instead of just Trevor. For the first time, he wasn't the law school golden boy, the charming heartbreaker. He was just a man, and I found myself wanting to know more. One date turned into 2, then 3, then a habit we couldn't break. He was everywhere all the time. Late-night phone calls that stretched into early mornings, his jacket draped over my shoulders when I stayed up too late studying. The way he looked at me, like I was something rare, something worth holding on to. And just like that, my guard started to slip. When he told me he loved me, I almost laughed, not out of disbelief, but out of sheer surprise. This was Trevor Whitmore. The man who never committed, the man who never said the words first. But he did, and for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe in something reckless. So when he got down on one knee, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, surrounded by people who gasped and cheered, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered, before my heart had the chance to catch up with my mind. I thought I had won. I thought I had changed him. I had no idea that the real enemy wasn't Trevor at all. The first time I met Trevor's mother, I knew. I knew from the way she looked at me, assessing, dissecting, already disappointed. She didn't have to say a word. Her expression told me everything. I wasn't what she wanted for her son. Maybe I wasn't polished enough, wealthy enough, obedient enough. Whatever it was, I didn't fit the picture she had in mind. but I told myself I could win her over. I tried. God, I tried. I complimented her home, asked about her interests, offered to help in the kitchen. Every attempt was met with a polite but cold smile, a dismissive glance, a subtle reminder that I was an outsider. Trevor's always been drawn to unconventional choices, she'd say with a laugh, as if I were a phase, as if I would disappear eventually. Trevor told me not to worry. She just needs time, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. She'll come around. I wanted to believe him. But deep down, I knew better. Time didn't change her feelings. If anything, it made them worse. She had a way of making me feel small, like I was an intruder in my own marriage. Every holiday, every family gathering, there were little comments, sharp enough to cut, subtle enough to be dismissed. Oh, Madison, I suppose not everyone grows up knowing how to set a proper table. Or, Trevor, you've lost weight. You need someone who really knows how to take care of you. She smiled as she said it, always careful, always calculated. And Trevor? He never noticed. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that she didn't have to love me, just respect me. But then, the dismissive glances turned into something more insidious. She started making plans without me. Family trips, events, dinners where my presence was nothing more than an afterthought. It wasn't outright cruelty. No, that would be too easy to call out. Instead, it was exclusion, a quiet kind of erasure. Still, I held on. I wanted to be the bigger person. I told myself that if I loved Trevor enough, if I proved myself enough, she'd finally see me as more than an inconvenience. I was a fool, because while I was busy trying to earn her approval, she was busy trying to replace me. I should have seen it sooner. The way she always found a reason to bring up other women, old girlfriends, family friends, women she deemed more suitable. At first, I thought it was just nostalgia, a mother reminiscing about the past. But it wasn't. It was a warning. She didn't want me there, and she was going to make sure I didn't stay. It started with casual mentions. Oh, Madison, did you know Trevor ran into Emily last week? Such a sweet girl, always so elegant. Then it was dinner invitations, ones I wasn't included in. You wouldn't have enjoyed it, dear, just some old family friends catching up. And then I started noticing things I couldn't explain away. Text messages from unknown numbers, a perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his jacket, excuses that sounded just a little too rehearsed. I told myself I was imagining things, that Trevor couldn't, betray me like that. Not after everything, not after choosing me. But something inside me had already started to crack, and what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't even begin to imagine, was that the betrayal wasn't just his. It was hers. The truth came in whispers, in late nights spent alone, in the quiet hum of my instincts telling me that something was wrong. I had ignored the signs for too long, excused the growing distance between us, convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. But then, one night, Trevor left his phone on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. I didn't mean to look. I told myself I wouldn't. But when the screen lit up with a message, "Can't wait to see you again." Same hotel? Something inside me shattered. My hands moved before my mind could catch up, scrolling through messages, emails, reservations. I wanted it to be a misunderstanding, a joke. But the more I read, the more the truth wrapped itself around me, tightening like a noose. Trevor hadn't changed. He never had. And the worst part? He didn't even try to hide it. Because deep down, he knew I would never suspect the person orchestrating it all. His mother. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe this was just Trevor being Trevor, and she was as oblivious as I had been. But then I found the emails. They weren't just between him and the other women. They were between him and her. "She's getting comfortable, Trevor. You need to keep your options open. I had lunch with Lauren today. She's beautiful, smart, the kind of woman who understands our world. I made dinner reservations for you and Emily next week. I told her you'd be there. Don't embarrass me." I read them over and over, my hands trembling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. She hadn't just tolerated his affairs, she had arranged them, encouraged them. And Trevor, spineless as ever, had let her. I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could do was stand there, frozen, as the reality of my marriage collapsed around me. She had never wanted me here, and now she was making sure I left. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at that screen. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't feel real anymore. My hands ached from gripping the phone too tightly, my breath shallow, chest tight. A betrayal like this doesn't just break you, it rewires you, changes something fundamental inside. And yet the worst part wasn't the cheating. It wasn't even the lies. It was that I had fought for this, fought for them. I had endured her cruelty, excused his neglect, convinced myself that love was something you proved through resilience. But love wasn't supposed to be a battlefield, and I was done being at war. Somewhere between the numbness and the rage, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to destroy them. There's a certain clarity that comes with betrayal, a sharpness, a focus. I had spent too long drowning in doubt, second-guessing myself, wondering if I was overreacting. But not anymore. Not after seeing the truth spelled out in black and white. I wasn't just a woman scorned, I was a lawyer, and lawyers don't crumble. We build cases. I took screenshots of everything, forwarded emails to a private folder, saved text messages, bank statements, hotel confirmations, every disgusting little detail that proved exactly who Trevor was and who had been pulling the strings. I documented it all, methodically, like evidence in a trial. Because that's exactly what this would be. They thought they had played me. That I was just another woman in Trevor's long history of discarded lovers. But they underestimated me. And now, I was going to make them regret it. I spent the next few days in silence, calculating, planning. Every moment I had spent loving Trevor, every second I had wasted trying to win his mother's approval, it was all fuel now. I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I met with my own lawyer first. A damn good one. Not some high society firm that catered to men like Trevor, but a shark. A woman who had seen it all, who knew exactly how to dismantle a cheating husband's life piece by piece. Together we built a strategy, airtight, devastating. Then I started laying the groundwork for the fallout, quietly, subtly. I reached out to reporters, the kind who loved a scandal. I gathered every shred of evidence that would not just win my divorce, but ruin him. His career, his reputation, his entire carefully curated life. Trevor and his mother had spent years playing their game. They had no idea I was about to flip the board. The final step was execution. Every detail had to be perfect, every move timed for maximum impact. I wasn't going to quietly walk away. No, I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to choke on the consequences of their own actions. So, I waited for the right moment. A family dinner, formal, elegant, filled with the people Trevor and his mother worked so hard to impress. The kind of setting where appearances mattered more than the truth. The perfect stage for what I had planned. I arrived in silence, composed, wearing the kind of confidence that made people uncomfortable. Trevor kissed my cheek absent-mindedly. His mother barely looked at me. They had no idea what was coming. The room quieted as I stood, pulling a neatly stacked folder from my bag. Evidence. Proof. Their destruction, packaged and precise. I let the silence stretch, let them squirm, before placing it in front of Trevor with a single measured sentence. You wanted to humiliate me? To erase me? Congratulations. Now you lose everything. And just like that, the house of lies they built started to burn. The silence after my words was suffocating. Heavy. Almost unbearable. Trevor stared at the folder like it was a live grenade, as if opening it might somehow make it all worse. His mother, always composed, always in control, went rigid, her fingers tightening around the silverware, her knuckles white. I waited. Let them feel it. Let them sit in the wreckage of their own making. Trevor finally flipped it open, scanning the documents, the screenshots, the reservations, the proof. His face drained of color, his mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? Sorry? It wasn't what it looked like? I can explain? No. There was no explaining this, no undoing it. His mother was the first to break. Madison, she began, her voice carefully measured, but I could hear the edge of desperation creeping in. This is unnecessary. Whatever misunderstandings... I laughed, loud enough that the other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Misunderstanding? I repeated, tilting my head. Please, tell me what part of I made dinner reservations for you and Emily next week is unclear? And just like that, the last of her dignity crumbled. I felt an icy clarity sweep over me as I watched their stunned faces. In that charged moment, the noise of the dinner party faded into a background hum, leaving only the raw sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Every whispered remark and exchanged glance from the other guests seemed to echo my inner resolve. I stood firm, embracing the consequences of my choices like a necessary reckoning. The power in my hands was palpable, a weight that both empowered and liberated me. I realized that for the first time, I was reclaiming my narrative, no longer a pawn in their twisted game. I could see the shock and betrayal in Trevor's eyes, a mirror reflecting the collapse of everything he had built. His confusion morphed into anger, then slowly into resignation as the evidence unfolded before him. Every piece of proof was a silent testimony to his betrayal, laid out meticulously for all to see. His face, once a mask of charming confidence, now contorted with the regret of a man who had lost his grip on reality. I watched, not with cruelty, but with a profound sadness for the man I thought I knew. In that moment, his downfall felt both inevitable and painfully human. Around us, the dinner guests shifted uneasily, murmurs of disbelief rippling through the crowd. Conversations halted as all eyes turned to the unfolding drama. Some faces revealed sympathy, while others betrayed curiosity, their whispers a soft chorus to my declaration of victory. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching out like a silent verdict on the life Trevor and his mother had constructed. I felt an overwhelming mix of liberation and sorrow, a release from the chains of deceit, yet a mourning for the love I once believed in. This wasn't just about revenge, it was the end of an era, a painful severance from a past built on illusions. As I slowly sat down, the finality of my actions settled in like a heavy cloak. The room remained silent, each guest absorbing the weight of what had transpired. I could sense that, in that very moment, the course of our lives had irrevocably changed. My heart, though battered, beat with a newfound strength, an echo of every painful lesson that led me here. I knew the journey ahead would be steep and unforgiving, yet I was ready to embrace it. And as I gathered my scattered thoughts, a subtle anticipation for the future began to form, hinting at a life reimagined and reborn. Trevor finally found his voice, but it was weak, hollow, nothing like the man I once loved. Madison, he started, his hands gripping the table's edge like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Can we just... I raised a hand, cutting him off. No, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. You don't get to explain. You don't get to soften this. I leaned forward just enough that only he and his mother could hear me. You lost. Accept it. His mother let out a sharp breath, her carefully curated composure crumbling at the edges. Do you really want to do this here? She hissed, her voice low, seething. In front of all these people? I tilted my head, feigning thoughtfulness. You know, I said, voice syrupy sweet, that's an interesting question. Because I didn't start this here, you did. You dragged me into a marriage you were actively trying to sabotage. You orchestrated the lies. You encouraged the affairs. So yes, I do want to do this here. I want every single person at this table to see you for exactly what you are. The hush in the room turned suffocating. Guests exchanged glances, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some pretended not to listen, others had stopped pretending entirely. Trevor's mother opened her mouth again, but this time, no words came out. And that silence, it was my victory. I didn't wait for them to recover. There was nothing left to say. I had made my case, delivered my verdict, and now it was time to walk away. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress with slow, deliberate movements. Around me, the weight of my revelation still hung thick in the air. Trevor looked small now, smaller than I'd ever seen him. And his mother. She sat frozen, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. The woman who had spent years orchestrating my downfall had finally lost control. With one last glance, I met Trevor's gaze. "You wanted to be free," I said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Congratulations, now you are." I turned to his mother, allowing a slow, knowing smile to cross my lips. "And as for you, I hope it was worth it." Then, I walked away. The click of my heels against the floor was the only sound as I left the table, left the room, left that life behind. I didn't rush. I didn't run. I wanted them to feel every second of my departure, to understand that this wasn't just an exit. It was an ending. And when I stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight I had carried for years lifted. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes for just a moment, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled.